Hello class, my name is Zhichen Wang and welcome to my final video essay. The film I choose to analyze is The Sandwich Man. The Sandwich Man is the film composed of three short stories. I will discuss one of them, Sans Big Dough, directed by Ho San San. The story tells the father who has to dress himself up as the clown and take billboard to sell smells on the street in order to make a living, but is mistaken for a stranger by his son at home. Through this seemingly insignificant tragic comedy of father and son, I want to explore two issues. First, how the bodies of the bottom workers were commoditized by modernization on the eve of economic takeoff. Second, how the film, in return, reveals and challenges the structural alienation. Next, I will combine the historical context, character symbols, and key scenes to gradually dismantle the social truth hidden behind this cloth mask. China Taiwan in 1962 was a place of poverty and illusion. Land reform and development dividends did bring the first pot of gold to the island, but the so called economic miracle was still far in the future, and the export oriented policy had just started. At that time, most people still needed to rely on bags of flavor to make a living, and there were still workers carrying wooden barrels on their shoulders on the street to make a living. The entertainment industry was prosperous on the surface, but dialect films had been classified as inferior, and only Mandarin films had the opportunity to enter the Chinese theater line. As a result, lower class men like Kun Shu could only paint their bodies like posters and wander the streets to earn a living and wide wages to support their family. They were forced to play the role of modern models at the door of consumer society, but they had no chance to truly step into prosperity. The film chose to magnify the daily life of a living billboard family in this historical crack, presenting the poverty, fear, and identity struggle that have not yet been cured behind the highlight of modernization to the audience one by one. In Sans Big Dough, Ho Hen San uses only a few characters to build a small social profile. Each person is both a narrative force and a living symbolic puzzle. First, the child's father, Kun Shu. In the morning, he puts on his costume again, mixes the water in the basin to mix paints, and painting himself into a never fading commercial smile. Once he went out, he was no longer a person, but a piece of a mobile medium. The camera often took a long shot to follow his footsteps. It was compressed very small between the city poster wall and the high-heading slogans, as if he would be replaced by the brand new billboards in the next second. The hunched back and the sweat drops falling to his ankles clearly indicate the consumption of labor, and his board that can be replaced at any time reveals how the lower class body has become the convertible currency for capital circulation. Second, the child's mother, A. Chu. The film did not give her loud lines, but repeatedly gave silent close-ups and the way she carried the child on her back. Under the dim light bulb, the rice jar was empty, but she had to take care of the child and her husband 3 meals a day. Her existence reminds us how the invisible surplus value of housework in economic statement supports a coexistence of cheap working hours and high profits. She is not only the glue of the family, but also the most easily overlooked shadow of the prosperity myth. Third is the son. For this little boy, his father and the clown are the same face, only when the bright mask appears, he is sure of safety. The father, after removing the makeup, is like an intruder, making him cry in fear. The director uses a childish perspective to sharply point out that the conception logic intervenes in family affection. Children are trained to use commercialized symbols to identify and attach to, and subtly internalize the masked father as normal. And fourth is children, boss and uncle. His cloud job is not decent. He's teased and laughed at by children, pointed at by passersby, disliked by the theater owner, and regarded as the shame by his own uncle. Through these four layers of character chains, the film solidified the grand economic narrative into specific and micro family joys and sorrows. People are first forced to play roles and then objectified as comedies. In the end, even blood love can only be confirmed through masks. Lee believes that Taiwan's new film used small characters to reflect the cracks of the Great Era, while Different further points out that the clown's body is objectified as part of the advertisement in the urban landscape. That year, several directors in the Taiwanese film industry publicly declared that they wanted to record the greatest reality with the smallest budget. This trend was named Taiwan New Cinema by the academic community. It rejected studio shooting of stars and luxury sets, and instead chose real scenes, long shots, local dialects, and focuses on marginal experiences such as migrant workers, demolished farmhouses, and lost childhood. Directors believe that rough negative and non-professional actors can better see the wrinkles of society than polished dream factories. However, realism is not without cost. When Song's Big Doll was submitted for review, officials accused it of poor shots that insult the image of the country. The censorship department required that bad spots be peeled off like peeling a rotten apple, leaving only the bright flash. The medium pointedly called the incident the peeling apple incident. Scholars, film critics, and popular newspapers rarely stood on the same front, questioning, can covering up scars prove health? In the end, the film was released in its entirety, marking the first victory of the new cinema in its struggle for creative freedom, and also making Song Speak Doll the focus of public opinion overnight. In Li Qi's view, the reason why the new cinema chose the imperfect cinema strategy was not only due to financial constraints, but also the political and ethical gesture. That coarse-grained film retained the noise of life, let the dialogue pierce the official Mandarin monologue, and let the faces of ordinary people seamlessly connect with the audience's daily experience. In other words, the more corrected, the more it can force the audience to look directly at the suppressed goings under the myth of development. Song Speak Doll was born in such an aesthetic and ideological confrontation. On the other hand, it continues the realistic techniques of the new cinema's long shots, naturalized and dialect dialogues. On the other hand, it uses the highlight dramatic symbols of the cloud mask to present a modification of the working body to the audience. Um, as a reminding that if even the most daily laughter is sold at the price, then is the so-called modernization progress or disguised deprivation. The first long shot of film fully demonstrated Kunshu's labor alienation process. The morning sun is not yet glaring, and there are rows of advertisements on both sides of the street. Kunshu, with clown makeup on his face, slowly climbs from the bottom of the picture. He's not walking, but squeezed into the billboard that can be replaced at any time. Different pointed out that this details highlights the absurdity of the laborer's body being seamlessly embedded in the urban advertising landscape. This shot uses the least narrative information but constructs the most impactful ideological criticism. Before the economy benefits the bottom, the body is first objectified, stared at, and priced. This is the first bill that modernization issues to the little people. When the uncle pointed out at the clown and blamed him, "Do you make a living by dressing like this?" I think this is the tacit and condemnation and ridicule of low-paid service workers by the whole society. Their hard work is packaged as street entertainment, and ridicule itself is a part of the value of the commodity. On the other hand, Quinshou's naked upper body and dragging the broken costume together reveal the same social logic. The labor of the lower class is not only ridiculed, but also designed as a public humiliation ritual. Sweat, mud stains, and bones symbolize the exposure and vulnerability of workers after being squeezed by modern machines. The empty track suggests that the train carries capital to the world, but there's no seat left for him in the carriage. As Daniel Different pointed out, this objectification of the laborer's body as part of the urban landscape not only creates viewing pleasure, but also makes people accustomed to treating humiliation as part of the daily landscape. Through these images, the film makes us realize that when society exchanges the dignity of work for an image that can be entertained, labor is degraded from the mean of livelihood to a simple that can be viewed and consumed. At this moment, the dignity of the little people also needs to be sold as at a discount. The film bends the cold steel spars of the microstructure into tiny cries and fixed smiles, allowing us to see that while society commercializes joy to the point that even babies need to use masks to recognize their relatives, then the so-called economic takeoff leaves behind not only high-rise buildings and output value, but also deeply buried emotional void between generations. The sadness of this little person is far more acute than the salary figures because it directly cuts into the core of identity and family warmth. If modernization loses respect for people's true faces, it will be at the cost of severing family ties. After Quincy found that his son did not recognize him after removing his makeup and cried, he put on clown makeup again and said the title line of the film in the mirror, I'm my son's big doll. Ho Kong San captures the self-deprecating realization here. The father understands that they just adore his child and even accept it happily because the modern game rules he can only change himself into the doll to exchange for a moment of peace for his child. Saul's big doll was not only shaped by its social situation, but also intervened in the public opinion of film ecology at that time, which had a profound impact. It is like a mirror reflecting the haggard faces in the shadow of the economic miracle. It is also like a lever praying the stubborn iron door of the censorship mechanism. It is more like a fire igniting the aesthetics trend of Taiwan's new film to care for workers and disadvantaged groups. It forced the society to rethink if modernization is just to make people wear brighter masks to make a living, then who is the so called miracle built for and who is silenced for it? When the question is no longer whether individuals work hard, but how the system turns labor into the performance and makes the families lose their sense of reality, taking off the mask may be the starting point for re-identifying each other and rediscussing fairness. Okay, that's the whole content of my presentation. Thank you for your listening. Here's some is the related resources.